Every civilization has bowed to the same force, even if it gave it a different name. Beneath temples, calendars, and empires hides a single idea: the ruler of time. A presence that doesn't destroy through chaos, but through order. It measures, limits, and consumes everything that lives. To understand its story is to understand why every world ends the same way: in repetition, decay, and silence. The ancients didn't see it as a planet. They saw a mind behind the flow of years, a power that built the prison of matter and locked the soul inside. They called it the law of return, the reason nothing truly escapes its beginning. Kings offered sacrifices, priests calculated the heavens, and whole societies shaped their lives around this invisible master that demanded obedience through the ticking of cycles. Old myths speak of an age before light, when the sky glowed with a dull violet sun and time moved slowly. Humanity lived in a world without night or day until that order collapsed and the age of labor began. From that moment, every culture built its existence around the clock: work, harvest, birth, death, all under the same rule. That rule never disappeared. Its symbols still surround us: the ring, the cube, the six-pointed vortex. They appear in monuments, religions, corporations, and nations. Each one is a memory of that ancient order, rebranded for modern eyes. This is the story of that forgotten god, the one behind our calendars, our systems, and our limits, the one that turned time into servitude and still collects the debt. In Greek mythology, Cronus was not merely a powerful titan. He was an idea, a cosmic law, a principle that could never be stopped. The ancients feared him because they understood what he truly represented: time itself, the unstoppable force that consumes everything it creates. According to the old myths, when Gaia gave birth to the Titans, Cronus was the youngest, but also the most ambitious. Urged by his mother, he took a sickle made of divine stone and used it to castrate his father Uranus, severing the sky from the earth and opening the first wound of creation. From that act came order, but also separation, the beginning of the material world. And in that new reality, Cronus reigned during what was called the Golden Age, a time with no hunger, no war, no need for labor. Humanity lived close to the gods, in harmony, untouched by decay. But even perfection trembles under prophecy. Cronus heard the words that would define his existence. One of his children would overthrow him, just as he had overthrown his own father. Fear took root inside him, and from that fear came the act that turned him into a monster of legend. Every time his wife Rhea gave birth, Cronus would take the newborn and swallow it whole. Not out of hatred, but out of terror. The desperate instinct to preserve power, to stop time from moving forward. That image of the Titan devouring his own offspring is a mirror of the universe itself. Time consumes everything it loves. It gives birth only to reclaim. Civilizations, mountains, gods, all end up inside its stomach. Cronus is that machinery of inevitability, the ticking clock, the harvest scythe, the cold awareness that every beginning carries its end within it. Yet, his downfall was also inevitable. Rhea, consumed by grief, decided to deceive him. When her next child was born, she wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and handed it to Cronus, who swallowed it without question. The real child, Zeus, was hidden in a cave in Crete. When Zeus grew strong, he forced his father to regurgitate his siblings, and thus began the war between the Titans and the Olympians. Cronus was defeated and cast into Tartarus, and with him ended the Golden Age. Humanity descended through the ages of silver, bronze, and finally iron. the age of corruption, fatigue, and forgetfulness of the divine. The ancients believed that during Cronus's reign, time was not linear. It moved in eternal cycles without beginning or end. But when Zeus ascended, time became a straight line, and with it came death, progress, and anxiety, the curse of always moving forward. That shift is the tragedy of Cronus. The myth is not only about a god losing his throne, but about humanity losing eternity. Once the cycle was broken, existence became a countdown. Cronus devouring his children is not a story of divine cannibalism, it's a portrait of a universe consuming itself. The clock eating its own hands. And every passing year, every aging body, every civilization collapsing into dust repeats that same ritual. The Titan never truly died. He simply changed his name. Now we call him Saturn, but the fall of Cronus in Greek myth didn't end his worship. It only changed his name. When civilizations rose and fell, the same archetype survived beneath different languages. A god of time, of death, of cycles, of harvest and blood. The Greeks called him Cronus, the Romans Saturn, and in the older tongues of Mesopotamia and Canaan, he was El, Baal Hammon, and Molech, the hidden king who ruled behind the veil of the stars. When Cronus was buried under Greek myth, his worship did not die. It simply traveled east, through Babylon, through Canaan, through the burning cities of Phoenicia, where his name changed, but his appetite remained the same. The Babylonians watched that faint yellow light moving slowly across the sky and called it Shabbatai, the star of Saturn. They said it moved with the weight of judgment, as if dragging the dead behind it. To them, this was not a planet, but a gatekeeper of endings, the celestial warden that measured the lifespan of kings and empires. There, Saturn was identified with Ninurta, a god of war and harvest. Two opposites merged in one name, the bringer of abundance and the hand that takes it away. The sickle of Ninurta was not only for cutting grain, it was for cutting time itself. His festivals took place when the fields were full, and every sheaf cut under his image was an echo of an older ritual, one that demanded more than crops. That ritual found its purest, most terrifying form in Phoenicia. There, Saturn was reborn as El, the father of the gods, an invisible, absolute monarch, and as Baal Hammon, the lord of the furnace. Beneath those names, the same ancient logic took root. To sustain the order of the cosmos, the god of time had to be fed. In Carthage, that feeding took the form of flame. Inside the temples of Baal Hammon stood bronze idols, hollow and immense, their arms extended forward, waiting. Priests placed living infants in the hands of the statue, and as the fire rose from beneath, the metal grew red hot. The children were consumed in the belly of the god, and the city rejoiced, not in cruelty, but in terror, because to them, that act meant protection. Without it, Saturn would abandon them. The crops would fail, the sky would close, and the wheel of time would turn against humanity. Drums thundered to drown the screams. Flutes played to mask the sound of burning flesh. The crowd shouted prayers into the smoke as the smell of charred bodies mixed with incense. The people believed they were buying peace. What they bought was delay, a brief moment of order purchased with life itself. In the Hebrew world, this same god appeared as Molech, the deity of the Valley of Hinnom, where fires burned endlessly. Children were passed through the flames as offerings. The prophets described it as abomination, but the practice endured, whispered through generations, shifting its forms as civilizations evolved. Because the truth was too ancient to kill, Saturn does not bless, he balances. For every joy, a loss. For every birth, a death. To those who served him, the fire wasn't destruction. It was a transaction, a sacred exchange between flesh and eternity. The god of time devoured what was mortal, and in return, the cycle continued. The world was spared for another season, but behind every flame, behind every statue, there was the same presence. The Dark Father who watches from the outer edge of the heavens, who counts every heartbeat as a debt owed. And in that ancient smoke, rising from Carthage, from Tyre, from the valley of Gehenna, humanity learned its first lesson about Saturnian law, that existence itself was a contract signed in blood and renewed in fire. Long before Saturn was feared as the god of time, he was worshipped as something entirely different, the first sun. Ancient civilizations from Mesopotamia to Egypt preserved fragments of a memory older than history, a time when the light that ruled the heavens did not come from the star we now call the sun, but from a dim, stationary orb in the northern sky. That ancient sun was Saturn, and in those ages it was said to shine with a cold, golden light, a light not of heat, but of presence. The myths remember that distant epoch as the age of Saturn, an era of stillness and abundance, when humanity lived without fear of death or want. The Greeks called it the Golden Age, when Cronus reigned and the world required no kings or wars. The light of that age illuminated without burning, sustained without consuming. It was the symbol of a cosmos in equilibrium, a world without decay, without hunger, without time. But in the hidden cosmologies of antiquity, that light was taken away. Something changed in the heavens, a catastrophe, a realignment, or perhaps an act of rebellion among the gods. The luminous Saturn lost his throne. A new sun appeared, the bright, burning orb that dominates the sky today. And with its rise, the old order collapsed. The golden light was replaced by a harsher illumination, one that cast shadows and introduced the cycle of day and night, growth and death, beginning and end. In esoteric tradition, this event wasn't seen as simple astronomy. It was a metaphysical displacement. The true, eternal source of light, the Saturnian principle of harmony, was pushed aside by a force that embodied illusion, desire, and control. The visible sun became a mask, a veil that hides the deeper, older radiance behind it. What the eyes now worship as life-giving light, the ancients regarded as a counterfeit dawn. This is what occult texts refer to when they speak of the hidden or inverted sun. Not a literal dark sphere, but the concealment of truth beneath radiance. Saturn's light did not vanish. It was submerged, buried beneath layers of sensory reality and political myth. Humanity began to mistake visibility for divinity, worshipping what burns rather than what endures. The cult of the new sun became the cult of surfaces, the triumph of the physical over the spiritual, of spectacle over substance. It is important to clarify that this black sun of Saturn is not the same idea we have examined in other contexts. It does not represent the occult light of inner awakening or the hidden solar fire that purifies the initiate. Here, the Saturnian sun is black because it is obscured by deception, a darkness created by human blindness and the deliberate distortion of truth. It symbolizes the eclipse of authenticity by power, the way in which elites and empires have projected a false light to replace the lost harmony of the primordial one. In that sense, the modern solar cult, the obsession with progress, visibility, and perpetual brightness, becomes the continuation of that ancient usurpation. Every empire that rises under banners of light, every ideology that claims to illuminate the world, does so under the same shadow. The belief that the visible sun is the only sun. The true Saturnian current remains hidden beneath it, silent but intact, waiting for those who can perceive the dim glow beneath the glare. To understand Saturn as the first sun is to confront the idea that humanity lives under a substitution, that what we call illumination may be the very mechanism of control. The false light dazzles, blinds, and keeps the gaze fixed outward, while the real light, the one that was banished, calls inward, toward memory, stillness, and timelessness. The ancients called that lost radiance, the light of the Golden Age. The mystics called it the light before the sun. And those who still follow the Saturnian path believe it never truly disappeared. It simply sank beneath the veil of the world, disguised as shadow, waiting for the moment when humanity grows weary of the counterfeit and begins to seek again the black sun of truth, not the emblem of power, but the quiet, enduring light of what was once divine. Every civilization that inherited the shadow of Saturn carried with it a symbol, something so deceptively simple that most people never question what it represents: the black cube. You can find it everywhere. In the center of Mecca, millions circle around a perfect cube called the Kaaba. In New York, a giant black cube stands silently in front of the Apple Building. In Denmark, Australia, and the Vatican, similar monoliths appear as sculptures, monuments, and memorials, anonymous, heavy, and geometrically absolute. At first glance, they seem like modern art or architectural abstraction, but they are older than any religion, older than the languages that name them. The black cube is the sigil of Saturn, the geometric body that encodes everything he represents: density, structure, time, and imprisonment. In the language of sacred geometry, the cube is the material form of existence. 6 faces, 8 corners, 12 edges, all locked in perfect proportion. It is order frozen into matter. Nothing moves inside a cube. It does not flow, it does not breathe. It contains. To the initiates of the ancient mystery schools, this shape represented the limit of creation, the moment when energy congeals into form, when spirit collapses into matter. It is the architecture of the physical world, the cage of incarnation. That's why Saturn's symbolism has always been geometric. His planet is surrounded by rings, circles of confinement. His pole bears the hexagon, a 6-sided storm that has spun for millennia. If you fold that hexagon upward, it becomes a cube, the same geometry projected from 2 dimensions into 3. That is the secret hidden in the pole of Saturn, a celestial symbol of time crystallized into space. When occultists and philosophers spoke of the prison of matter, they were describing the cube. Every wall of it represents one axis of reality: height, width, depth, duration, causality, perception, the 6 faces of experience. Together, they form the boundaries of the human condition. Within that enclosure, consciousness moves like light, bouncing between mirrors. That's why the cube is always black. It absorbs everything, every color, every vibration, every life that enters its surface disappears into its density. And yet, it also radiates control. In corporate logos, the cube appears constantly, Saturn's children carrying his sigil without knowing it. The black boxes of technology, the architecture of finance, the endless repetition of cubic design, all echo the same pattern. The modern world, obsessed with grids, data, and structure, worships the cube unconsciously. Every skyscraper that pierces the skyline, every sealed server room, every glass office block reflects the same principle: compression of energy into form, spirit converted into order. In esoteric tradition, this is known as Saturnian compression, the process by which pure consciousness becomes measurable, countable, taxable, and controllable. The cube is not evil in itself. It is the mechanism through which time operates. But once you understand it, you begin to see the tragedy. Everything within the cube must decay. That is the true law of Saturn. What enters form must eventually collapse. Inside this geometry, the human soul lives suspended between eternity and entropy. Our lives unfold within the boundaries of a cube: the house, the office, the coffin, each one a smaller echo of the same shape. Even our digital existence now flows through literal cubes: servers, screens, processors, technological temples of Saturn pulsing with artificial light in place of fire. To the ancient adepts, liberation from Saturn's rule meant unfolding the cube back into the cross, breaking the structure of matter so that spirit could expand beyond time. That's why in Hermetic diagrams, the cube is always drawn beneath the symbol of the sun. To escape the black cube is to ascend from gravity into illumination. But most never do. Humanity continues to walk in circles around the cube, in Mecca, in Manhattan, in cyberspace, orbiting the same cold geometry that once ruled Babylon. Saturn does not need temples anymore. The cube has become the shape of civilization itself. Every law, every building, every system is one more wall in the architecture of time, and we live inside it, mistaking the cage for the world. At Saturn's North Pole, something moves that defies the idea of chaos. Inside an atmosphere made of storms and gas, a perfect hexagon spins, vast, stable, and impossibly precise. The Voyager probe saw it first in the 1980s, and decades later, Cassini confirmed it hadn't changed. The shape endures, as if carved into the clouds by an invisible hand. To scientists, it's a jet stream. To those who read symbols, it's a mechanism, a living diagram of what Saturn represents: form over flow, order over motion, law over life. In the language of the mysteries, the hexagon has always carried sacred weight. 6 sides, 6 directions, 6 expressions of space, above and below, east and west, north and south. It's the pattern of the Seal of Solomon, 2 triangles locked together, one pointing up and the other down, the eternal dance of spirit and matter. In ancient rites, that symbol wasn't decorative, it was functional. The magician drew it to contain power, to give shape to forces that would otherwise dissolve. Saturn bears the same design, written across its pole, as if nature itself had performed a ritual of containment at the scale of a planet. Around that central seal stretch the rings, thousands of fragments orbiting in disciplined harmony. Seen from above, the image is unmistakable. The hexagon at the center, the rings encircling it, a cosmic mandala of authority and obedience. The same design repeats everywhere energy seeks equilibrium. Honeycombs, crystal lattices, snowflakes, basalt pillars, even the cellular scaffolding of life. The hexagon isn't ornamentation. It's the footprint of order, the geometry through which chaos organizes itself. Within Hermetic philosophy, Saturn is the architect of time. His geometry converts eternity into sequence, transforms the infinite into something measurable. The vortex at the pole acts as a cosmic metronome, a point where the eternal current becomes rhythm. From that rhythm comes cycles: birth, growth, decay, death. The 6 sides mirror those phases. The rule that everything formed must bear its own weight until it collapses. When the hexagon is folded into 3 dimensions, it becomes a cube, the most stable form in the material world. In Saturnian symbolism, the two are reflections of one another. The hexagon as the plan, the cube as the structure built from it. Human existence unfolds inside that invisible geometry: the house, the office, the screen, the coffin. Every box we inhabit is a smaller echo of the same design. Even modern technology follows it. The servers, towers, and screens that shape our reality are all cubic, all based on the same principle. Energy confined, consciousness structured into form. For the initiate, the hexagon on Saturn's pole isn't a weather pattern. It's a cosmic engine, the point where idea condenses into matter, where freedom hardens into law. It marks the moment when the universe chooses coherence over chaos, balance over possibility. In that choice, time is born, cause is born, necessity begins. To look at that pattern is to look into the core of the physical world. 6 sides turning endlessly, a form that never ages, a message that reality itself is built from structure, not chance. The hexagon of Saturn is the motor of material time, the visible trace of an intelligence that speaks through geometry rather than words. And within that geometry, every living thing moves, grows, and fades according to the same command, the command of the god of boundary, weight, and measure. Everything the ancients saw in the sky was more than light. For those who studied the hidden architecture of the cosmos, Saturn was the visible face of something older, colder, and infinitely patient. From the perfect hexagon at its pole to the rings that bind its body, Saturn embodied a principle that terrified the Gnostics: structure itself. What others called stability, they called imprisonment. In the cosmology of the Gnostics, the true God was unreachable, pure, formless, beyond comprehension. Creation as we know it didn't come from that source, but from a lesser being, a Demiurge, who mistook his own reflection for divinity and tried to imitate the eternal world. That act produced matter, heavy and flawed, a realm where spirit was trapped inside flesh, condemned to forget its origin. Saturn became the emblem of that Demiurge, the lord of time, the builder of limits, the architect who mistakes confinement for perfection. His rings mirror the boundaries of the physical realm, circles within circles, impossible to cross without awakening. To the Gnostics, the passing of seconds, the aging of the body, the rise and fall of civilizations, all of it was a mechanism, not a mystery. The clock was the cage. Every moment that slipped away was another link in a chain forged by the god of time himself. They believed the soul descended into this world through the planetary spheres, each ruled by an archon, a power that stripped the soul of its divine memory. At the outer edge waited Saturn, the final gatekeeper. He was the first to receive the fallen spark and the last to release it. His gravity was spiritual as well as physical. It bound the soul to repetition, to the wheel of birth and death, until remembrance shattered the illusion. That is why Saturn was feared more than adored. To the uninitiated, he ruled with justice and order. To those who understood, he was the jailer of light, a god of boundaries, necessary but merciless. His gift was time. His curse was the knowledge that time devours everything. The Gnostics saw the material world as a reflection, cast by the Demiurge's arrogance, a mirror that only shows fragments of truth. Every law of nature, every mathematical perfection, every fixed orbit carried a shadow of that mistake. They imagined existence as a cosmic machine, self-sustaining and beautiful, but indifferent to the consciousness trapped inside it. The heavens turned, the years repeated, the stars followed their equations, and beneath it all, humanity slept, dreaming within a prison made of symmetry. To awaken was to remember that beyond Saturn's rings lay the pleroma, the fullness of divinity unshaped by matter. Liberation meant breaking through the architecture of time, dissolving the illusion of cycles, and escaping the reach of the Demiurge. But few achieved it. Most souls continued their descent and return, orbiting within his dominion like dust around a dying sun. The hexagon, the cube, the weight of matter, all were extensions of this same law. Saturn, as the Demiurge, didn't punish. He maintained. His role was to preserve the illusion of continuity, to keep the system functional. The universe needed a warden, and he accepted the task. The tragedy is that humanity mistook the warden for the creator. When the old mystics spoke of freeing the spirit, they meant escaping Saturn, not destroying him, but transcending his order. To see the world as mechanism, to see time as artifice, was the first step. Because only from outside the clock can one hear how loudly it ticks. Saturn stands at that threshold, half god, half machine, the Demiurge who gave form to our prison and the measure to our decay. And as long as the rings keep turning, the souls within them will continue their slow revolution, believing they move freely, never realizing they orbit the god of confinement itself. The rule of Saturn didn't end with temples or sacrifices, it simply changed form. What the ancients once expressed through altars of fire, the modern world sustains through systems of time, debt, and labor. Structures so familiar that no one questions them. They are the true Saturnian chains, invisible but absolute, binding humanity to a rhythm it cannot escape. The first link is time. Every civilization built after the fall of the Golden Age has measured life by the clock, an invention older than machines, older than empire. The division of the day into hours, of the week into 7, of the year into cycles of work and rest, all of it descends from the Saturnian calendar. The ancients called him Cronus, and that name still rules the world. We live according to his measurements, bowing to the geometry of minutes and deadlines. It is a form of worship, though no one admits it. Every alarm, every schedule, every expiration date is a prayer whispered to the god of limits. The second link is debt. Saturn's law is exchange, balance, and payment. For every gain, something must be returned. Modern finance carries this rule in its bones. Debt ensures movement, the perpetual rotation of value around a center that never moves. Those who owe are kept in orbit, just as the moons of Saturn are held by gravity. Interest is the priesthood of this system, translating human time into currency, reducing the soul's potential to a number that can be calculated, delayed, or confiscated. In the old language of mystery schools, debt was karmic, not economic. But the meaning is the same. You owe, and as long as you owe, you remain in the system. The third link is labor. In myth, Saturn presided over the harvest, the sowing and reaping that kept the world alive. In the modern age, his sickle reappears as the schedule, the contract, the never-ending cycle of work that defines identity through productivity. The worker, chained to the clock and the wage, repeats the ancient ritual daily, offering hours, strength, and will to sustain the machinery that feeds on time itself. The offices and factories are his new temples. The screens are the altars. These three forces, time, debt, and labor, form a closed circuit, a living version of Saturn's rings. Each orbit represents a layer of obedience, a law of return. We move through them, believing we progress, when in truth, we revolve around the same center, the illusion of freedom measured by minutes and wages. That ring is the contract of the species, a pact written in the architecture of society. It promises stability, but demands servitude. The price of order is submission to the calendar. The ring of Saturn is not only a planetary symbol, it is the psychological orbit that defines the human condition. To step outside, it is to risk collapse, poverty, exile. That is why almost no one leaves. The ring guarantees existence, even if that existence is mechanical. It offers purpose in exchange for autonomy, safety in exchange for infinity. To the Gnostics, this cycle was the proof that the Demiurge still governs the world. To modern humanity, it feels like progress. But the principle hasn't changed. Everything that lives must serve the system of time. Every clock that ticks, every transaction that binds, every contract that renews is another rotation around the ancient god. The irony is that Saturn no longer needs temples or priests. We carry his worship in our pockets, in our schedules, in our exhaustion. We call it normal life. But from the occult perspective, it is a ritual of obedience performed by an entire species, generation after generation, as the planet of limits continues its slow revolution through the heavens, silent, unbroken, and satisfied. The ring remains unbroken because it does not need to. Humanity keeps walking in circles, mistaking motion for escape, unaware that the orbit itself is the cage. They told us the gods were myths, but their systems never left. They just went digital. The ancient cult of Saturn didn't vanish. It evolved. It replaced fire with screens, temples with institutions, priests with CEOS. The same structure that once demanded sacrifice now calls itself civilization. Look around. The symbols are everywhere. The ring, the cube, the eye within the circle. Every major power, every institution that shapes human life, government, banking, technology, religion, carries the same geometry, the same obsession with symmetry, hierarchy, and control. And at the center of it all is the same old idea, that order must be preserved no matter the cost. In ancient times, worship meant blood. Today, it means attention. The sacrifice isn't made on altars anymore. It's made every time you unlock your phone. Every scroll, every hour lost to the endless feed, every breath spent counting money or minutes. All of it goes to the same place. It feeds the machine that measures, records, and regulates human energy. Saturn doesn't need worshippers kneeling before idols. He rules through habit. People think conspiracy theories are about secret societies and reptilian elites. But the real control is structural, not personal. The priests of this new Saturnian cult don't even know who they serve. They just enforce the same rhythm: productivity, efficiency, repetition. Time converted into labor, labor converted into capital, capital converted into more control. The loop is perfect. The rings of Saturn were once symbols of divine boundaries. Now, they are the blue rings of networks, satellites, and corporate ecosystems, orbiting, enclosing, quantifying. Each ring is a system designed to keep the world synchronized under the same clock. Finance, media, politics, all turning in rhythm, all keeping the illusion that progress is movement, when in truth, it's rotation. This is why the elites always build in circles. Boardrooms, city layouts, logos, everything that governs us echoes the same design because it comes from the same archetype. It doesn't matter whether they know it consciously. The architecture thinks for them. The system perpetuates itself because it was built in the image of the god of limits. The black cube has become his emblem again. You'll find it in corporate logos, memorials, art installations, the glass towers of tech companies. Even your phone is one. A perfect, glowing cube that captures your attention, measures your time, and drains your energy in exchange for distraction. The priests of old burned bodies to sustain the god. The priests of today burn ours. And here's the part most people never understand. This isn't mysticism, it's psychological engineering. Every system that governs modern life, money, productivity, social status, is a ritual of measurement. We think we invented it, but the pattern is ancient. The cult of Saturn has simply replaced sacrifice with statistics. Some call it coincidence, others see a blueprint. But the result is the same, an invisible order that rewards obedience and punishes reflection. A world that worships light, yet functions entirely in shadows. When you realize that, the conspiracy stops being theory. It becomes geography. It's in the layout of cities, the structure of days, the logic of the market. It's in the way we've learned to wake, to work, to want. The same geometry repeats itself endlessly because it doesn't need believers. It only needs participants. The ancient god doesn't speak, he calculates. And as long as the world keeps its clock synchronized, he doesn't have to do anything at all. Every myth about Saturn ends the same way. A god of limits, time and order, devouring everything, and a hero who slips through his grip. In Greek myth, it was Zeus, hidden in a cave. In Gnostic texts, it was the soul that remembered its origin. In Hermetic tradition, it was the alchemist turning lead into gold. The stories aren't literal, they're maps for escape. They show that Saturn's prison isn't a planet, it's a way of living and perceiving. And because it's a pattern, it can be broken. The first step is recognition. You cannot leave a system you don't see. That's why Saturn's symbols are everywhere. Rings, cubes, clocks, because once you notice them, the spell begins to crack. Recognizing the pattern isn't paranoia. It's the end of unconscious worship. It turns the clock from a master into a tool. The second step is reclaiming time. The Gnostics taught that time becomes a cage when you live entirely inside its calendar. Mystics across cultures practiced timelessness, meditation, fasting, silence, waking at odd hours, living without clocks for periods. These were acts of revolt. When you stop measuring your life in minutes, you stop feeding the god of minutes. You begin to recover a sense of cyclical, eternal time, the memory of the golden age. The third step is breaking the debt loop. Debt is the spiritual mirror of time. You owe, therefore you remain. To escape Saturn is to simplify, to reduce the contracts that bind your energy. Pay what you owe, avoid unnecessary obligations, and stop sacrificing your attention to systems that harvest it. The soul that owes nothing moves freely. The fourth step is transforming labor into creation. Saturn rules work, but he also rules mastery. When your work feeds only a system, it's sacrifice. When your work becomes an act of conscious creation, it's transmutation. This is the meaning of turning lead into gold. The weight doesn't disappear. You refine it into something that feeds you instead of draining you. The final step is unfolding the cube. Every occult school has some version of this. The cube is matter. When unfolded, it becomes the cross, an image of expansion, of spirit leaving confinement. To unfold the cube is to remember that every limit has a door, every pattern a point of exit. It means breaking habits, seeking silence, seeing your life as more than productivity or identity. It means living as if the ring isn't the horizon, but the boundary of a playground you can step beyond. Escape from Saturn doesn't look like chaos. It looks like reclaiming sovereignty over the one thing he truly owns: your time and your attention. It's not about rejecting structure entirely, but about learning to hold it lightly, using the calendar instead of serving it, working without becoming work, being aware without being watched. In myth, the gods never freed Cronus's children until Zeus grew strong enough to force him to vomit them back up. In the inner myth, you are both Zeus and the swallowed child. The act of remembering is the act of escape. When you no longer mistake the clock for the cosmos, you step out of the orbit. The rings keep turning, but you stop revolving with them. That is the real exodus, not running from Saturn, but standing still until the mechanism spins past you. No longer a cage, but a wheel you can step off whenever you choose. Every civilization has tried to name the same god, and every age has failed to escape him. He ruled the stars as Cronus, the earth as Saturn, and now rules the digital ether through systems that bear no face. His empire has changed form, but never essence. It governs through measurement, through the invisible comfort of order. And we call that order civilization. What began as sacrifice by fire became sacrifice by routine. The altars turned into offices, the priests into administrators, the sickle into the clock. Humanity no longer burns its children, it burns its hours. The rhythm of Saturn continues unbroken because no one believes in him anymore, and that disbelief is his greatest disguise. But hidden within every myth of servitude lies the same counter-myth, the one about those who saw the pattern and refused to orbit. The alchemist, the mystic, the Gnostic, the rebel. Each recognized the ring not as a wall, but as a circle that can be stepped out of. They learned that the cage of time only exists when you mistake repetition for progress. Once you see the orbit, you can leave it. The Saturnian age never truly ended because the world still fears disorder more than stagnation. Yet every fear is also an invitation. The fear of timelessness, of silence, of doing nothing, that is where the cracks begin to form. Through them seeps the old light, the dim golden glow of the first sun, the memory of a world before the clock began. Maybe that light was never extinguished. Maybe it waits behind the endless noise of the present moment, behind the calendar, behind the feed, behind the hum of every machine built to measure what cannot be measured. Maybe escape was never about leaving the system, but about remembering what it replaced. Because once you stop mistaking time for life, the rings lose their power. The cube unfolds. The god of limits loses his hold. And what remains isn't chaos, it's eternity, quietly waiting beneath the ticking. That is the oldest secret in the world. Saturn never chained humanity. Humanity chained itself and called it time.